Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Amen. Please be seated. Well, here we are on Maundy Thursday, Holy Thursday. And what we're here to do tonight is in many respects something that Christians are in fact called to do every time they meet together. We're called to break bread in remembrance of Christ here at our family table, the altar. And of course we do that, don't we? Week in, week out. And sometimes we don't think too much about it. It's something we just do. And why? Well, because Jesus said, do this in remembrance of me. And St. Paul, in his first letter to the Corinthians, which reading we had just now, tells us just that. It was an established practice for those early Christians to get together and to break bread in remembrance of Jesus. And if we're looking for some kind of reason for doing so, well, we have to look at the Gospels. Matthew, Mark and Luke have, on the night before Jesus' death, the account of what we call the Last Supper. Jesus sharing with his disciples, and there are different versions of exactly what happened. But the principle of it is the same. Jesus took bread and wine and transformed what had been a Passover meal into something which was even more dynamic. That he was talking not just about an historical reality for the Jews of the first century, that they were remembering their ancestors who had passed through the waters of the Red Sea and had gone from slavery in Egypt to freedom in the Promised Land. But he was also telling them something else, and that is that those people gathered around the table and those who were to come to believe in Jesus would themselves be passed over. Not just in a physical sense, but in a spiritual sense, about passing over from death to new life. And if we read, as I said, those Gospels of Matthew, Mark and Luke, we find all about that. And so that's why we have our service. Jesus says, do this to remember me. And so we do it, don't we? Yes, it's okay, you're allowed to nod. Is anybody out there? I know it's late in the day. But actually tonight we didn't use Matthew's, Mark's or Luke's Gospel. Whose Gospel did we use?
John's.
Thank you very much. That was quick. In my congregation back in England, they would sort of be scratching their heads and thinking, you know, I'm sure there's another one, but I can't remember what it is. Yes, John's Gospel. And John's Gospel doesn't actually have an account of the Last Supper in quite the same way. He doesn't talk about Jesus taking bread and breaking it and saying, this is my body and my blood. No, he has something else altogether. He has Jesus taking a towel and a bowl of water, and as his disciples had come to the supper that he'd invited them, he gets down before them to wash their feet. Something very different altogether. And then Jesus says, as we heard in that gospel reading, I want you also to do as I've done. Wash one another's feet. Have a think about that, if you will. Washing one another's feet. Now, for those of you who are not in the know, the Eucharist, of course, has not just taken on great significance down through the centuries, but as Father Christopher will tell you, it's also big business to those companies who supply things for us. You think of the Eucharist. We have people that make those wafers, the big ones and the little ones, and they are specialists in their trade, and we buy from them. We buy special communion wine because it's got that extra taste of sanctity. Apparently. We also, of course, have special vessels which have cost a lot of money. Gold and gold-plated and silver and all those kind of things. And they're all up there hidden, you know, behind the burse and the veil. But they're there. Everything is there. And of course special linen too, which is marked with a little embroidered cross, just so that we get it exactly right. And even our family table has its own special tablecloth with lots of little crosses upon them, just to make sure we get it in exactly the right place. It's all very precise stuff, and down through the centuries, practices have been established and evolved to the extent that what we now have is, of course, our Eucharist that you and I take almost for granted. But here's the thing. I wonder if those early Christians, instead of getting together to break bread in remembrance of Jesus, had instead, when they come through the church doors, had decided, tell you what, we've got to wash one another's feet, and doing that instead. So you wouldn't be coming to church nowadays every week to receive the blessed bread and wine of Holy Communion and the Mass. No. You'll be coming to get your feet washed. So you would be coming through the doors, and there would be somebody greeting you, and they wouldn't be giving you a little book about, how to receive communion in the service. They'd be saying, may I take your shoes? And they'd be putting them into a little rack. So you'd walk into church there with your bare feet, which is why I've done a little demonstration for you by being barefooted here. And you would come in, and we would have our liturgy. We would have established down through the centuries loads and loads of rituals around feet washing. Theologians would have thought for ages about, do we wash the entire foot? Or do we just maybe wash the big toe as a sort of token gesture in the imitation of Jesus? Would we instead, Father Christopher and I, have not gone to theological college, but have gone to a podiatry school instead to learn how to tend the feet of our flock? And of course, those companies which make all the bits and pieces for the Eucharist, they'd be making other things instead. We wouldn't have lovely pottery bowls and jugs and towels. No. These would be especially made, and they would have little crosses on them, probably, on the towel, and maybe perhaps an embroidered face of Jesus as he's washing his disciples' feet. We'd be seeing that upon there. Or perhaps even a nice gold-plated bowl in which we would pour the water. And also, of course, we couldn't just have anybody pouring the water. No. You have to be trained to pour the water. And you have to wear special clothes to pour the water, and so on. And you couldn't possibly be allowed to pour the water to wash people's feet unless you've gone through a special training course to show you how to wash people's feet. It gets very complicated, all this church stuff, doesn't it, really? Mind you, of course, now within what we call the Catholic churches of the world, which includes the Anglican Communion, at the end of the Mass, Father Christopher has to consume all the elements. So would he then have to pick up the big jug and then drink the bowl? Toenails, corns, and everything. And all those bits of rough skin that hang about between the toes. Somehow priesthood doesn't quite seem so appealing, look at it that way. But it's just a thought, isn't it? Thankfully, the early church didn't go in for the foot washing quite so much, and the bread and wine seemed far more appealing, which is what we're going to be doing tonight. But there's the big question, isn't it, about what we are supposed to make of tonight. About this very idea of having these two things, the juxtaposition of bread and wine, the Eucharist, the Mass, of which we're so familiar, and this thing which we only do once a year. That's what makes tonight so special, because both things are to do with commandments of Jesus. which is why today is called Maundy Thursday, from the old Latin word mandatum, a commandment. And Jesus gives us those commandments. But importantly, as he says in the Gospel reading tonight, I give you a new commandment. And what was that new commandment? To love one another. You're absolutely right. Top of the class. Welcome.
My confirmation.
Oh, excellent. Well, there you go. Thank you. You're absolutely right. To love one another. What we do in church should be a reflection of our love for each other. One of the most wonderful privileges I've ever had, and I'm not just saying it because I'm here tonight, was to go along the communion rail when I was finally pointed in the right direction on Sunday, and to give communion to practically every person present, because of the practice to give communion to every baptized person. Not by virtue of were they clever enough, or had they passed a certain test, or were they of a certain age, but it was a demonstration of God's love for everybody. And it was a most tremendous privilege to do so. And that really is about what the Eucharist is all about. It is, from our part as priests, a most tremendous privilege. Yeah, we get to wear nice clothes too, but that's not the point. We are here to serve in imitation of Christ. We serve you so that you can serve one another and the world outside of these four walls. And I know that here at St. Jude's, that's exactly what you do. That's why it's so good to be among you this Holy Week. But also, what I also see tonight is that we are here, in a sense, to demonstrate that servanthood of Christ in washing the feet of those who come forward for it. You come forward and we minister to you. But it's not like, Jesus being the English butler, with a sort of a silver salver with the water on it saying, good evening, sir, may I possibly wash your feet? No, in the first century, the person who washed the feet of those who came for meals was a slave. We've translated it as the word servant. It's not. It's a slave, a person who has no rights whatsoever. They are simply there to do the bidding of their master. Which is why what Jesus was doing at that supper in John's Gospel is so shocking. Because he was doing something which someone in his status should really not be doing. He was the host. He was the Lord. He was the teacher. But tonight, he's also the slave to his disciples. Maundy Thursday, therefore, turns everything upon its head. Because the master becomes the servant, the slave. And also, as well, all rules disappear. It's not about thou shalt or thou shalt not. It's simply one thing. Love one another. That is what this night is all about. And over the coming days, we will see together just what that love meant for Jesus in action. It wasn't about giving people a friendly squeeze and a hug at the peace. It was about being willing even to lay down his life for those he loved. For us, for you, and for me. This is a precious, precious time. It's good that we are here together to share it. And I do hope that after these days in which we reflect upon what that servanthood of Jesus is all about, and that sacrificial love of Jesus is all about, that we will know the power and the joy of the resurrection life of Jesus, which isn't all about giving people nice bits of chocolate on Sunday and things like that. I know some of you are really looking forward to that. Or having your first beer for several weeks. I happen to know that some people are also looking forward to that. But it's about knowing the power and the joy of the risen life of Jesus Christ with us and in us, every step of the way. Amen.
Amen.